Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Charles Aris podcast. My name is Chad Oakley, and I have the honor and privilege of serving as the Chief Executive Officer here at Charles Aris. And with me from the firm is Clifton Vaughan, who is a Senior Associate Practice Leader and helps to lead the fund level practice here at Charles Aris. Today's episode of the Charles Aris podcast is all about private equity portfolio operations, and it is meant to serve two groups of people. The first are private equity firms that are interested in building or optimizing a portfolio operations group. And the second is for people that have an interest in learning more about a career in portfolio operations. Today, we are so honored to have Danielle Lachman as our guest. Danielle is an operating partner at Charlesbank Capital Partners. Danielle is a key part of Charlesbank's Portfolio Resources Group, otherwise known as PRG, which is what Charlesbank calls their portfolio operations team. Danielle, thank you so much for spending some time with us today and for sharing your insights about private equity portfolio ops.
I'm thrilled to join you, Chad. Thanks for having me.
It is our pleasure. Danielle, why don't we start with a little bit about Charlesbank? Why don't provide a little bit of that commercial about who Charlesbank is for our listeners?
Certainly. Charlesbank is a classic mid-market investor. Super deep roots in coming out of the Harvard endowment some 27 plus years ago, and has been focused on mid-market private equity and some opportunistic credit strategies since then. So consistent middle market focus. And what I would say about Charlesbank that I think is a great differentiator is the people. It is a group of humble, curious, wired to solve problems group of people. They create great relationships internally and with our portfolio companies. And it's an honor to work with this group of people. I am humbled working with this group of people.
Awesome. That's fantastic. Let's spend a little time talking about portfolio operations at Charlesbank. And there's a lot of different ways that we can take this, but why don't we start with just maybe talking about the portfolio operations group and perhaps how it is structured. And then maybe we'll get into the specific roles and responsibilities that you have. But do you mind just talking about portfolio operations in general?
Yeah, sure. So portfolio operations, I like to say we're a small and mighty team. There are 16 of us, and we are focused we have a bunch of generalists and a bunch of specialists. And we basically focus throughout the life cycle of an investment. So a little bit in diligence, definitely help get our investments and portfolio companies off to a strong start. And then spend time with some of the companies, either accelerating value, helping them with an inflection, and then through exit planning. So throughout the life cycle, we've got and then a variety of levels and roles of experience as well. So from operating partner, we've got VPs and SVPs, and then our senior associates earlier in their careers.
Yeah. So, I'd love to learn a little bit more about kind of how you guys engage with your portfolio companies. Is Charlesbank's portfolio operations team kind of showing up to quarterly boardroom meetings and that's kind of where the relationship lives? Is it deep in the weeds on specific strategic initiatives that were part of the value creation plan? Can you speak to that just a little bit?
The answer is yes. So we show up really as soon as an investment is made, and often before the investment is made, to really help the investment team, the management team create and document the value creation plan. What is it that they're going to do? Why was this a good investment for Charlesbank? What was the thesis? How do we actually make that thesis come to life through a team? And so we invest a fair bit of time up front to do that. Once that's in place, there may be elements of that value creation plan that we help accelerate, whether it's a go-to-market strategy, ramping a sales force, putting together a technology upgrade plan, building out a marketing department. It could be a number of things. And then the team is generally off and running. And that's when specialists get involved. Of course, our talent team is critical as part of this, right? Your value creation plan, you create it, you've got to have the right talent in place in the portfolio company. And so they do a phenomenal job, our talent team, really assessing, do we have all the right talent in place to execute the plan? And how might we get that right talent in place? And at what point? What's now, next, later? So that's how the life cycle starts. Eventually, depending on what happens in the world around you, sometimes the plans work perfectly. Sometimes life happens. And so there might be an opportunity to come in and really help with an inflection point as well. There might be a new leader in place. They need to get a plan together. So we'll come in and do some of that work as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. Danielle, you mentioned before that Charlesbank's portfolio operations team is a mix of generalists and specialists. And this is a big topic amongst private equity these days, especially within portfolio ops, right? I think if we went back 5, 10 years or what have you, a lot of these groups were really kind of composed of generalists. As this function within the world of private equity is maturing, we're seeing a blend of generalists and specialists. And a question that we get often is, what are the most popular specialist roles? And so, and the question there, I think, the answer there could be dependent upon, well, what does the portfolio look like? What's the investment thesis for a particular firm, et cetera. Recognizing, maybe you could talk a little bit about Charlesbank's primary industry focus, and then does that actually translate into the specialists that you have on your team? How's that weighted there?
Oh, great question. So our industry focus, healthcare, industrials, business and consumer services, and TNTI, technology and tech infrastructure. In terms of I think that drives some of the specialists' needs, but some of it doesn't matter what industry you're in. And I'll get to that in a second. I think the other thing that actually matters is where in a company's life cycle are they, right? Are they a mature business that's been around for 100 years? They're large, or are they founder-led and they're having their first inflection of capital, right? Like that's probably drives some of it as well, because they're trying to create some functions and really professionalize their organization. So in terms of the specialists that we see, or I can say there's a need for, certainly talent. We have marketing specialists, and so that's brand, it is digital marketing, it's performance marketing. You can get pretty technical pretty quickly in marketing, and it's great to have some experts who have been there and done that, seen it before, know all the right questions to ask, and can really roll up their sleeves and help a team through an opportunity. One of the areas that we're also seeing is AI. So how do you think about tackling AI or integrating AI as a tool? And for a lot of our portfolio companies, they're experimenting with it. Well, can we help them? Can we help them get focused? Can we give them some resources? Can we help them prioritize and see what's their AI journey? What does that need to look like? And then, so that's the Charlesbank set of resources I can see. And, we've talked about, and I see other firms, whether you've got procurement resources or finance resources, right? If this is the first time they've had private equity sponsorship, it's different than a public company. It's different than being founder-led. And so having that support is helpful as well.
Danielle, that's awesome. Thanks for sharing. Maybe moving more into what the generalists do, and maybe you in particular, would love to talk a little bit more about your role. And I can only imagine all the things that kind of fall under your job description, but perhaps would love to start with what are the 3 top responsibilities in your role?
Equity value creation, and equity value creation. No, really, I mean, honestly, that's the truth. That's why we're part of the team. How that manifests itself, I spend a lot of my time with the leaders of the portfolio companies, with the deal teams, the investment team, and also mentoring our team and helping to develop our team as well, so that they can take on those challenges. So that's really how I spend my time. But at the end of the day, it is partnering with the management teams to drive equity value creation, but doing it in their language and their lexicon. Portfolio company, you don't speak equity value creation. You often speak operations or whatever your industry is. So it's being that translator.
When you're working with the management teams of portfolio companies, I'm assuming when Charlesbank makes an investment, there's an investment thesis, right? We've got a vision for this, right? We think we know how we can grow equity value in this business. How much of your work with the management teams is focused on designing a value creation plan versus actually executing on that value creation plan? And how far up do you roll your sleeves, right, in those instances? In fact, for instance, do you ever parachute in and actually take on an interim C-suite role in a business, or actually go spend truly like months at a portfolio company? Or is it more advice and guidance, if you will, to the management team who's then doing the execution?
Okay, let me. You had a couple of questions in there. I think starting with, do you build it or just do you build the plan or execute the plan? Look, at the end of the day, and the best value creation plans are co-created. This is about taking ownership, accountability for the plan. And so if you're a management team, you can't be handed a plan. The best way to do it is to co-design it, right? You have an investment team with a thesis, and then you've got a management team with all of the practical know-how, and you've got to capture that and infuse that into the plan. And that helps with prioritization, what they can do today versus next year, or next month, and how do you accelerate things. The best value creation plans, though, are the ones that the management team would say, yeah, this is our plan. So a lot of going and creating that value creation plan is, I'm a facilitator. And yes, I help ask the provocative questions. And I, of course, have the investment team's thesis. And more often than not, it's that thesis plus, right? The management team knows how to unlock value. And so it's really pulling all of that together. The
Yeah.
second part of your question was, do operating partners or anybody parachute in? And I have not personally. I do spend a lot of time with the teams. I will go and travel and spend a lot of time there. I haven't been in an interim operating role. However, we do have a couple of people who have. So one of my specialist peers, she has parachuted in a couple of times to be an interim chief marketing officer. And our VPs do secondments in portfolio companies, which I think is phenomenal. It's a win-win-win. It's great for the portfolio company, and it's phenomenal for the individual to really get that operating experience.
Danielle, one piece maybe I would be curious to hear you talk about is kind of the relationship management piece that you talked about. And, a lot of the people that listen to this podcast are in strategy consulting. And so that's probably a dynamic they appreciate. And we hear all the time, they advise clients, they hand off a recommendation, and then they don't really have any oomph, if you will, to kind of make sure that anything happens. And I realize it's a very different, but still delicate dynamic in portfolio operations, given the equity. And would love to just understand what that typically looks like.
Ooh, I would say it feels much more like a partnership with the management team than it did when, in my days of consulting, and I did 2 stints at BCG, that felt very much like a client consultant relationship. And,
Yeah.
it can maintain throughout years, but it was that kind of relationship as opposed to a true partnership where we have aligned interests 100%. And so it makes it fun to work with the management teams. I love to put a plan in place and then continue to have conversations with the team. How's it going? Tell me about this. What have you learned here? Around the different initiatives. The other thing I would say is the quarterly board meetings help that as well, right? So I can sit through that and, we put the plans in place with milestones and KPIs, and I guarantee we're never right. When you put a plan in place, some things you'll exceed expectations and others, that didn't quite work out as we thought. But that's a chance to really go back and reflect and retool and say, okay, well, what do we need to do differently to capitalize on where we're having success, or retool if something's off track?
Right? All right, terrific. Danielle, let's switch gears. Let's talk about you. Okay, let's talk about your background, right? And how you got to this place and kind of those formative experiences that allow you to be successful in the role you have today. So would you mind just kind of walk us a little bit through your career path? Where did it start, and kind of what were the key steps?
Oh my gosh. Well, I have had a really fun career path, but it's not been linear. So my career path is dotted with a lot of personal growth and business building and following passions and working on great problems with really phenomenal people. But look, the brass tacks of I've done 2 tours of duty at BCG, started my career there, and then I was there right before I joined Charlesbank. I spent 7 years at Target in strategy and merchandising, ultimately running a $2 billion P&L and fresh food, rolling out perishables to the entire country. And then I spent 9 years at Staples in different roles. So strategy, e-commerce, B2B marketing, and ultimately in a transformation role.
Hmm.
I'd say the common thread throughout my entire career is really around building new capabilities, driving change, driving transformation. I love doing that. It's the blend of a business idea and then making it happen through people. And that to me is the secret sauce and what I love to do. I love to build out capabilities and build out businesses. So that's the common thread. But I've meandered. I mean, you heard me say, I think 4 or 5 different functions that I was in. So I think all of those pieces are actually what set me up for being able to do a role like this in portfolio operations. I've seen lots of different businesses, run businesses. I've tripped and skinned my knees, so I know what that looks like too. And so how to look around the corners. I think those are the things that really prepare you for this type of role, that breadth of experience.
You mentioned a lot of different functions there. I'm curious, do you say there was any one in particular that was like, this is, if I could pick one of these kind of experiences, this was the one that I felt like really kind of started to bring it to life for me? Like, for example, a lot of people leaving consulting want to be P&L owners. And a lot of our hiring authorities who are hiring for portfolio operations want someone who owned a P&L. That's just the one that jumps out to me. But I'd be curious if you have a thought process on that.
Um, Certainly owning a P&L was a transformative experience, right? When you can sit there and you've got to go through your spreadsheet and go, okay, I missed sales yesterday or last week or last month, and I was in retail. So we kind of knew by the hour. And you have to go and diagnose it and figure it out. That real time feedback, your customers vote with their feet and their wallets, really helps you fine tune your business decisions. And when you make a mistake, man, do you know it? But those are the things that I am a better leader, business person because I've had those experiences. I've had a chance to make those mistakes and learn from them. And now I know when to look around corners, or I know the questions to ask. I know where the pitfalls are. And I think it also just makes you, for me, I'm a super curious person and a continuous learner. And I think that is really a skill set that you need to bring to these roles, right? Just constantly asking why. Why? And you get that when you're a P&L owner, because you have to figure out why things are happening so that you can do them better, differently, et cetera.
All right, Danielle, we always like to ask, what is it that you think most private equity firms misunderstand about portfolio operations?
Yeah, I think it's not that it's misunderstood, but I think for me, the real secret sauce is around taking a business idea, a thesis, um, an EBITDA generating opportunity, and how do you execute it? Culture in a portfolio company it plays a really big role in being able to execute. And being able to not only understand that culture, but navigate the culture and figure out how to get things done is critical. And I think sometimes we can all underestimate how much of a role culture plays in your ability to get things done. And then, by the way, trying to change a culture, right? When new leaders come in and they're like, oh man, I need to change this culture. It takes time. This is not an overnight thing. And so I actually there was an old cartoon where somebody said, culture eats strategy all day long. I see it, and I really believe it. So I think that is something that needs to be incorporated as you think about how do you execute plans.
Yeah. Danielle, on that, that's actually very interesting. On that, in your experience, how important does Charlesbank evaluate culture of a potential investment prior to making that investment? In other words, during the due diligence stage. And what level of, like, if you see a company that you're interested in, but the culture is a little off, how much does that impact, you think, Charlesbank's willingness to actually make that investment?
It's 100% a factor. Culture is my word, but they would maybe call it leadership dynamics or how decisions get made. And can that team scale? How do they work together? So I think, the investment team would have different words for it, but it does come down to, and I've seen this a couple of times where, teams excited about a business and they're like, ooh, I'm not sure that team can execute and scale the way we would need them to.
Love it. Danielle, maybe going from there, would love to talk about maybe just guidance for those who kind of want to be you and kind of work in this function. We, as you know, do a lot of the compensation studies. And one thing we ask people is like, what would be your preferred kind of function if you leave consulting? And our most recent study, portfolio operations was the number one thing. It was something like 55% of consultants were interested in
Wow.
working in portfolio operations. It's crazy. I know it's exploding with popularity. And so we get asked all the time, like, hey, how do I get there? What are the experiences that would set someone up for success? And Chad and I have our own opinions on kind of what makes a great candidate for this, but I'd be curious to know what you've seen kind of be as the key hallmarks that set someone up for success for this kind of job.
Oh my gosh. Look, I think it probably depends on level, right? So somebody coming
Yep.
out of consulting more junior, earlier in their career versus much later in their career. I think those are probably two different answers. I don't know that there's a perfect roadmap. I would say there's not a perfect roadmap, but I think if you've got experience, you know, in a consulting firm, you really learn how to think in frameworks, prioritize, size up an opportunity. That's helpful. If you've got portfolio operating experience, or just call it operating experience, it doesn't have to be a portfolio company. I worked in public companies. You understand how to take an idea and get it done. And so that matters, and that experience matters. And man, it sure is nice to work with people who've worked in portfolio operations before or have a PE background and can speak the language. That said, that's a little bit of, it's hard to find all three. I think being passionate about what you do, following opportunities because they're interesting to you, like these roles, they pop up and you'll be ready for them. Don't sit around and wait for them, but really get real experience, build things, go into finance, go into running a P&L. That real practical experience is never a waste of time. Not sure that's the perfect answer because I don't know that there is one, but just being curious. I think the other thing is there's a mindset in portfolio operations. I will tell you, for me, I get tremendous joy seeing other people be successful. And so if I can set somebody else up to be successful, I feel good. It does not have to be me. And that, I think, goes a long way as well. I'm not the star of the show. The CEO is the star of the show, the investment team. Like, I do my best work when they are successful and I help them be successful. So I really look at my role that way. And that doesn't work for everybody. But for me, that brings a lot of joy to see other people succeed.
Yeah.
Danielle, that's great. And I imagine that your consulting experience probably taught a lot of that mentality, that kind of low ego presence, right? Right. I know that Bain, BCG, and McKinsey, that's a big part of, we're not the stars, right? Other people are the stars. And so I suspect that was a formula part of the experience for you to gain that skill set.
For sure.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
right. Danielle, I know we're almost at time, and so I want to bring it home with a couple of kind of more fun questions that we like to ask of individuals. And so why don't we start with, like, your favorite book, or maybe a book that you're reading recently that you found compelling. It could just be your favorite book of all time.
Oh, my favorite book is whatever is on my nightstand. My husband will tell you I'm a voracious reader. Once I have a book, I can't put it down. So then I have to take a break because, for Christmas, he'll give me a book and he's like, and the 3 days that goes with it for you to read it. So I love to devour any book. I love I love fiction, strong female protagonists who overcome adversity. I love to get lost in these stories, but no one book, for me, it's really whatever's on my nightstand.
That's great. Is there an app that is on your phone that you find one that you can't live without?
Oh, yeah, the New York Times game app. I am a huge spelling bee fan. Play it every day. Love doing the crossword puzzle if I've got time. I love puzzles. That's probably another thing about this job. It's all about solving puzzles. So New York Times game app, hands down, can't live without it.
Awesome. And is there if you listen to podcasts, is there one podcast that speaks to you the most?
Ooh, podcasts. I love listening to Adam Grant, Rethinking. His podcast is fun. It makes me rethink. It's compelling.
Right?
How I Built This, always fun. I get a lot of inspiration out of those and just how to think about problems differently or look at something differently. I have a long commute. So those are two that I listen to in addition to books that are recorded. Whatever novel I'm reading, I'm also listening to on my commute.
Yeah, that's great. Adam Grant's fantastic, Wharton professor, and then How I Built This is terrific. Great entrepreneurial stories about that. That's awesome. Danielle, any topic that we haven't covered today that you would like to add before we wrap up?
I think I would probably just wrap up by saying you started the conversation saying, look, this is really targeted at two different audiences: people, private equity firms thinking about portfolio operations team, and people interested in getting into portfolio operations. And I think I would say, and what I've seen talking to peers, there's no one answer. And we didn't talk about that a lot, but I'm sure you all see there are many forms that this can take. And even within Charlesbank or in other portfolio operations teams, they evolve, right? Like you learn and figure out and how to do better. And so it's this continuous improvement. And I think it's really cool to see the value of this role, and it has propagated. Um, and I think we can all learn from each other by asking those questions and learning from each other about what a good portfolio operations team looks like.
That's great. Everyone, our guest today has been Danielle Lachman, operating partner at Charlesbank Capital Partners, who has done such a wonderful job of giving us wonderful insights on all things portfolio operations in one of the most respected private equity firms in the world. Danielle, thank you again for joining us on the Charles Aris podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.